Okay. In this piece, I want to cover off holiday lets. For the whole year, we've had growing demand from our landlords for advice on mortgages for holiday lets. And within that category, I want to focus in on larger holiday lets today specifically. And what do I mean by larger holiday lets? These are typically 6 to 10 bedroom properties. Let's say that's probably the typical example of a larger holiday let. And yes, it could be a big family Victorian home, perhaps, but more often than not, I'm seeing landlords come to us with something that was an old bed and breakfast or a guest house or a care home. And not only there's potentially some great negotiations to be had there, and some very keen prices that you can get these for, that really lend themselves they're in the right areas to be a great larger sort of holiday let, but they come with challenges, and that's why I want to focus on this, because look, it's all in the preparation for you landlords, getting the planning, getting your ducks in order, and therefore I just want to sort of cover off a couple of scenarios here for you to think about. The one common denominator with these types of property is that a change of use is required. So, if they're a B&B and a guest house, they're likely to be on a C1. If it's a care home, maybe on a C2. But there's going to be a change of use got to be put in place. So that's got to be planned in. And it's either going to go to C3, more likely to something called sui generis classification. So how do we take that forward? How do we buy that property when you've got the challenges of not only was there's a change of use, but there's possibly some work to be done. So the thing that determines which scenario, and I'm going to show you a couple of slides in a second about a couple of different scenarios, and it's driven by the amount of renovations that's required. So my first scenario is where there's what I'm going to call significant, not cosmetic stuff. So cosmetic would be pretty much no more than decoration, maybe a change of carpets, and you're good to go. I'm talking about something a little bit more significant, not necessarily structural, but there might be some internal things that need to move around. Particularly if it was an old care home, you've got things that want ripping out. You might have some rooms that need repurposing. There were more day rooms. Now you want to use them as bedrooms. And a lender gets involved. This is your decision whether something's cosmetic or is requiring renovation, development, improvement, whatever label you want to give to it. This is ultimately it's the valuer's decision on behalf of the lender. So, when you're speaking to your broker, give them a really the chapter and verse on what needs doing, a schedule of works that what needs doing, so that we as brokers can talk to the lenders and try and get a steer on whether something will be deemed as cosmetic or significant renovations, because ultimately that determines whether a long-term lender is going to give you a mortgage at the point of purchase. If they see it's just cosmetic, fine. But if they think there's renovations, they're not going to give you that long-term mortgage, because they're going to say, well, you're not going to get an income stream going for 1 month, 2 months. Now you're going to be optimistic, saying, look, I've got my team. They're all sat in a van outside. Literally the day we get the keys, they're going to be in. They're going to rip it apart, and we're going to be out in a week. A lender doesn't have that same rose-tinted specs on. They're a lot more pessimistic, realistic, whatever you want to call it. They're going to think there are going to be issues when work's been done. It's going to pull up surprises. There's going to be, tradespeople shortages. They're going to be wandering off. So they're going to be thinking, if you're saying a month, they'll be thinking 3 months. And therefore, if they feel it's going to be longer, they won't get that holiday let revenue coming in. Therefore, they're not going to give you that mortgage at the point of purchase. Therefore, my second bullet point says, oh, we'll just buy it cash then. Fantastic if you've got 300, 400, 500 grand of cash with your joint venture partner or your investor or your own savings, happy days. Otherwise, you've got to look at bridging or some form of development finance. And again, as brokers, we're used to that. We can put that in place. It's essentially a two-step strategy. Financially, you've got to put this finance in place to allow you to purchase it. As soon as you get the keys, then you're going straight in to do the conversion. And of course, simultaneously, you've got your change of use application going through. And then as soon as that's done, you can refinance And hopefully at the higher value as well. I mean, that's the one advantage of splitting it into two parts, is that once the work's done and there's an uplift in valuation usually from that, we can then approach a longer term lender and hopefully we can get them to value it at not the purchase price, but this uplifted valuation. And maybe you can actually pull out some of that new equity to refund your cash. Great news. Also, you've then got the widest choice of lenders in the marketplace because you're now presenting a shiny new holiday let. It's already been advertised, all the works have been done, and the change of use is in place and you're good to go. So in that scenario where there's renovations required, that's the two-step process that really you want to be focusing on. Okay. What if the work genuinely is something that is only cosmetic and a lender and their valuer agrees that from the schedule of works that that is indeed the case? Well, we don't need that two-stop strategy necessarily now, but we have a slightly different sticking point. So here's the thing. Lenders, generally speaking, want the change of use in place before you submit an application. Now, how on earth do you do that when you're purchasing the property? Now, this is where if you're speaking to your broker at the very first opportunity, and the plan is that there is a lender that will allow you to submit an application while the change of use is in place, well, that's great. You can, as it says on my fourth bullet point, you can then carry on with your purchase, and this particular lender would put a condition on the offer. So it'll allow the application to go in, the survey's done, issue the mortgage offer, start on the solicitor and the legal work, but the lender will not release any funds until they can see that the change of use is in place. That's usually okay. The two will usually work side by side. It's going to take a good couple of months for the application to go through, which is, typically how, the change of use application is at least 2 months as well. So do the two side by side. You might, though, be in a position where you can go back to your vendor and agree a purchase option. If you don't know what those are, essentially that's an agreement with the vendor to say, look, if I give you, the vendor, a lump sum, now that could be anything from £1 to whatever you agree with the vendor, to say, look, sign this purchase option that says that you cannot sell it to anyone else over a set period of time. That could be 3 months, 6 months, whatever you agree with your vendor. And if they're not that motivated to sell that quickly, there isn't a lot of demand to buy the house, then there might be some appeal from that vendor to agree that. Also, you're giving them a piece of cash as well as part of that negotiation. So that then allows you the time to get that change of use. And once that comes through, then you can move straight back to actually putting that purchase in with the sort of wider choice of lenders. So it really does, as I say, come back to speaking to your broker about what the lender options are, how motivated your vendor is. And what I would say on this last point here is that if you can't negotiate with your vendor a purchase option, so you are having to put your change of use in at the same time as your mortgage applications going in, then there's only a few lenders that would have appetite to do that. And there's likely to be some compromises in what you can get on your finances. Let me give you a couple of examples. So it might be that you really want 75%, but actually the most you can get is 65%. It might be that you really want interest only, but actually this lender, yes, they'll allow you to put the application in, but they want it on a repayment basis. And it'd be something you've got to say, okay, is that a compromise worth doing? You might then sign up for, say, a 2-year deal. So for the next 2 years, your monthly costs are higher. And then in 2 years' time, maybe look to move to a lender onto an interest-only basis at that point. Is that a compromise that's acceptable? It might be that the lender we've got to approach doesn't use projections for what the holiday let is going to generate in terms of revenue, and use a far more prudent approach, in which case the outcome might be again that you're not going to get, may not get the lending that you require. So the takeaway from this for you guys that are looking at these larger holiday lets is around, again, speaking to your broker, making sure that you understand what the choice of lenders are, how much work's involved, whether you can negotiate with your vendor, and then seeing a nice clear plan, whether it's a one-step or a two-step strategy. But look, if you then, that still allows you to move forward and buy that property, then hopefully that's still a great opportunity and a great bargain for you. As always, there's a link to our booking system at the end of this piece. So if you do want to have a chat with us, if you're considering a larger holiday let, as I said, the sooner you speak to your broker to understand the pathway through to purchasing and adding that to your portfolio, the better it is for us as a broker, and obviously for you to know your way forward.